evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Wendell Town Board of Commissioners. Welcome. We have a big crowd here tonight. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's always wonderful. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight by Wendell Middle School, Andrea Cano Moreno. If you can come stand at the podium. Let me read a little bit about her before we all stand up, and I'll tell you a little bit about her. You can go around to the other side. That's perfect. We're also well trained. We're so used to it. Andrea is an outstanding 8th grade student at Wendell Middle School. She's helpful and kind to peers and adults, and her grades and character are excellent. She's a role model for others. Her language arts teacher says that her favorite thing about Andrea is that average is never good enough. She has a curiosity that will take her very far. Her band teacher shares that she asks questions and steps up to any challenges that are put in front of her. She not only learns music for band class, but comes to class prepared to play the most impressive pieces of music. Andrea is also a gifted artist whose work is featured on the Wendell Middle School walls. We are proud of her and look forward to seeing her continue to succeed in the future. So we just wanted to have you come here tonight so that we could recognize your hard work and what an outstanding student that you are, and have you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay? Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Best of luck in the rest of the school year.
Thank you.
Our invocation tonight from the Wendell Council of Churches, we're going to hear from Wendell Baptist Church, Errol Briggerman. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I, as usual, could I make a couple announcements?
You have the floor, absolutely.
This is beginning in the fall, and it's gotten really, really busy, as we all realize. First thing that we have that starts on November the 16th, this is for Relay for Life Craft Fair. It's really a big event it's grown into. We have it at our church, Wendell Baptist Church. It's from 9 to 2. It's called the Jingle Bell Express, and it's a big outreach for Relay for Life. So there's food and there's a lot of crafts that we bring in for that. Okay?
Tell us the date.
It's November the 16th, Saturday, November the 16th, from 9 to 2.
Okay.
And then the second one is our annual event we've done for years, and we were fortunate enough to get to have it at our church again. We call it the Thanksgiving Sing. It's the Sunday before Thanksgiving, November the 24th. Starts at 7, and this year it's at Wendell Baptist. And we have probably 5 to 6 churches at least come in and bring their best. And it's just a good time of fellowship and singing. And we've got a couple of youth groups this year that's going to participate. They've written their own music. And it's a good evening. And there's refreshments afterwards. So anyhow, just a couple of things going on.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us know.
Let us pray. Lord, thank you for this wonderful, beautiful day you've given us. It's just amazing, Lord, how you continue to bless us, bless this community. We are just so honored for your presence. You can see it in how our community has grown and thrived and been very successful. We just thank you for this, Lord. We just pray now, Lord, for our commissioners as they have decisions to make. We just know, Lord, that their decisions will honor you. For all these things we ask in your blessed name. Amen.
Thank you again for being with us. Is there any adjustment to the agenda? If not, a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now, public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment period. Public comment is your opportunity to share comments with the town board on any topic, as long as it's not an item scheduled for a public hearing. The town board receives comments and refrains from speaking. The comments are to be directed to the entire board, not an individual. You have 3 minutes. There'll be a little, thank you, that's going to time you when it's green, it will be green. When it turns yellow, you've got 30 seconds left, and when it turns red, your time is up, and I will stop you. We have one person signed up tonight. Katie Atkins. If you can come to the podium and give us your name and address, please, for the record.
You ready to hear me? So I'm Katie Akins. I
Akins, I'm
live,
sorry.
my address, is that how to say that? I live in Smithville, North Carolina, 3901 Swift Creek Road, Smithville, North Carolina, 27577. So like I said, I'm Katie. My husband he's the owner and operator of our business, Current Electrical Contracting. We are a small business owners. I'm here to speak to each one of you today about an issue. I feel it's my civic duty to talk to you guys about an issue that we've had. I think the citizens of Wendell also need to know about the dealings that we've had with a specific company in your town. It's important and you guys need to be informed. I would love to be able to speak for the many people who have contacted me over the last several hours. There are many who are too scared to come forward. There's had threats, there's been false allegations, and scare tactics. Many have been silenced. However, I am one who is not scared. I stand my ground firmly on the right side of the truth. My husband was contracted by this builder last year. My husband contacted this builder last year inquiring if he was looking for an electrical contractor. He was, and Current Electrical soon became a subcontractor for this builder. Our entire experience dealing with this man was nothing short of a nightmare. Getting payment was always a hassle. Payments were late. We had several checks that were bounced. Now those have all been cleared, but we did have several checks that bounced. We practically had to beg for our money. We had to start another job before we could get paid for the last one, or we knew we wouldn't be able to get paid. So after months passed without payment from our last project, we were forced to hire a lawyer. We had to file a lien on the property of the home that we did, and we are now in debt almost $10,000. This is a small family with 2 small children. We don't have the money to float other people's business. I don't think this is anyone that should be representing a town, and I don't think it should be anyone who's in business. I have documents proving that Ben Carroll, right up here with Old Oak Construction, is the one who owes us money.
Ma'am, you need to address the entire board, not a particular member of the
That's
board.
all I have to say.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, item number 4 is our recognitions, reports, and presentations. Item number 4A is recognition of Wendell Middle School teacher Sarah Claxton. Ms. Claxton, come up to the podium. Ms. Claxton has been teaching at Wendell Middle School since 2016. She's taught 6th grade for 3 years and is currently teaching 7th grade English and Language Arts. Ms. Claxton truly has a gift for building relationships with her students. Her laugh is contagious and you just can't help but smile in her classroom. She's always infusing humor and student interest into her lessons. When she plans lessons, Ms. Claxton thinks about what each child needs to be successful. She is caring, compassionate, kind, and reflective. These qualities have helped her students thrive and flourish in her English Language Arts classroom. Her students have gained confidence in their reading skills because of her instructional practice and the relationships that she has built with them. We are very fortunate to have Ms. Claxton as a teacher at Wendell Middle School. These are very kind things sent by the principal at Wendell Middle School about you. And we just wanted to have you here and congratulate you for being so great and to recognize you tonight and to thank you mostly for everything that you do for our kids at Wendell Middle School.
Well,
You have the floor if you
Okay.
want to say something.
I'm Miss Claxton, and these are the kindest words that anyone could say. This is the longest I've been at a school, actually, and I've been kind of in many districts and many areas in North Carolina, and this is kind of special to me. And it's because the people I work with, and it's because the students that are in the school at Wendell. And it's kind of just a pleasure. Sometimes you never know what's going to happen in your classroom in the 60 minutes, but it's always fun to see the outcome sometimes. And it's just a really, really neat place that I have become to put as my home. So thank y'all, and thank you for the award.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I'd just like to highlight that one, Miss Claxton and I met when she was Miss Stewart at Appalachian State. So just like to highlight that our winner tonight is yet again an Appalachian State person, which goes right in line with our football team this year, so.
All right, item 4B is our snapshot monthly report. We're going to hear from Town Manager Mark Collins.
If the board has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them now or later in the week.
All right, are there any questions for the manager from the board? Take a moment and peek at any notes that you've made. I'll make a comment while we're waiting. I'm very excited to see the new format. We've gotten it a few times now, snapshot. It's very informative, and when I look at it, I get really excited about all the things that I recall that we've done and the things that are coming in the future. So thank you for the detail and the level of work on it. Does anybody else have a comment about it or question? All right, moving on. Item 4C is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We're going to hear from Mike Norris and James Ford of McGill and Associates. This is highly anticipated.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and discuss the Parks and Recreation Draft Master Plan. Tonight and I'm Mike Norris and Jim Ford. You can call him James though. But this is an opportunity to present a draft, and as a work session, if there's any questions as we go through this plan, this is an opportunity for dialogue, questions, just at any time. If you have any questions during this or comments during the session, just go ahead and ask. But we've got several slides. Some of them we'll cover quicker than others, and we can come back as needed to address anything you might have. So go ahead, Jim.
Okay, I've loaded the PowerPoint here. I'm not sure if everybody can see that. And there was a clicker up here. Here you go. You have. Thanks. Okay, like Mike said, this is a work session. So we're in the process of developing this master plan. It's not done yet, but we'd like to share the progress. What have we done so far? Go over and look at your demographics, figure out who we are as a community, who we're growing to become. Look at the public meetings we've had so far. We've had a couple very successful public meetings. Jen, you were there.
I have, yeah.
We have started to devise some preliminary recommendations. That's kind of some of the things we really want your input on. Are we moving in the right direction? We're going to compare you to other communities. We're going to look at national trends and say, what's right for Wendell? So let's jump into it. Who are we? We're a young community, okay? Like the rest of the state, it's broad across the ages, but we have a lot of young families with children. That's something that's a little different than a lot of other communities. You know, the country as a whole is aging. Your community is trending younger than typical. I think that's something to keep in mind when you start thinking about what activities would be appropriate. Pretty standard as far as the race breakdown. I think the important thing on this slide is where are we going to be by 2030? You look at where we are today, this is a huge growth. It's looking at, I mean, it's a projection, 19,000 people. So recreation has to keep up. It's got to be able to provide services for this growing population or get left behind. Part of this process is, of course, looking at inventory. What do we have now? You know, and it's important to know where we want to go, but we have to know what we have now. Everybody's familiar with the community park and the community center. Very successful, kind of the hub of town. I think everybody would say that's kind of the hub of activity. The town square sees a lot of activity, especially on the weekends. I've been there a few times. There's people walking around using that too, so that's a popular spot. And of course, ball fields over at the schools at Carver. This map represents what we're talking about. You're looking at circles or level of service areas. You're looking at neighborhood parks. There's a mini park there in the red circle, and the orange circle is your community park. And why this is important is this is, of course, this is academic. This is how far are people willing to walk, or what is the area that a particular type of park serves. You'll notice all these red areas, that's Wendell, that's not typically served, okay? When you go through the survey, one of the things at the community meetings, people mentioned, oh, they love the community park, they're there all the time. Well, how do you get there? Almost everybody drives there. So you have a vehicular dependent service. That becomes an important aspect later when you start talking about, you know, where should future facilities go. As part of this process, it's just standard. We look at acreage. How much acreage do you have now, and what's a typical for a community your size? We're looking at regional, district, community, neighborhood, mini. The district and regional isn't really appropriate for this size town. It's just something that's part of that table. But community park-wise, you've got 82 acres. That's typical of a town with a core, you know, community park instead of lots of little parks around it. Some communities, it's the opposite. They don't have a big park, they have lots of little parks. Neighborhood parks, there's not neighborhood parks. There are a lot of neighborhood parks, mini parks. You've got the J. Ashley Square that counts as that. What we also like to do in our inventory is say, well, what about other facilities and amenities? Baseball fields, playgrounds, where do you compare? With your population now, you're looking at traditional National Park Recreation Association numbers. Okay, this goes way back. That's just, again, academic. This can change, but this is typical. For instance, you look at baseball fields. You've got 3 baseball fields out there, 5 baseball fields, but one's an adult. The rest can be used for softball or youth. Soccer, where are the soccer fields? But then you look at that other column where it's projected, 19,000, and you're saying, well, it looks like we need 2 additional. You need 4 for soccer, lacrosse, etc. Our task is to figure out how to achieve these added facilities and amenities. Where do they go? Do they go in your existing facilities, or do they need to be built out in future parks? The plan goes into a little more detail on each of these, including walking trails, etc. You also have private facilities. And one thing you have to keep in mind is you don't want to compete with your private sector. That doesn't make any sense. You want to encourage business, right? So far, this is the list of the typical stuff we heard at the community meetings and through looking through the inventory, which you have now. You're probably all familiar with this. This comparison is one that is really important to me because it's a snapshot, okay? You're looking at per capita expenditure. That's looking at the capital, that's everything. That's operations, facilities, it all. Per capita for recreation. Right now, according to the last collection, which is 2015, North Carolina Municipal County Parks Recreation Services study put out these numbers. Now, they do this about every 8 years. I wish they do it every year. It's a big task, and we're due for an update to this. But this snapshot shows you, in 2014 or so, you had about 6,000 people. You were spending about $56.57 per person on recreation. Now, at that same time, what were your neighbors spending? Now, we know where communities like Zebulon and Knightdale were back in 2013, 14, 15, but you can see a big difference. Now, why is that number so big? Well, they had a big project. Okay, these numbers fluctuate. It's not saying that it's like this all the time. It looks like Zebulon had a big project, their capital expenses were higher, so for that year, the number was higher. But it does show a trend. You're doing pretty good. Having done this for other communities around the state, you've got a pretty good per capita expenditure. But as you all know, as you grow, there's going to have to be more money put towards recreation. So, data collection. How did we go about getting the rest of the data we need for this plan? Reaching out to the community, public meetings, we had workshops. Let's go into a little more detail. We had a meeting at Big Truck Day, some of y'all may have been to that, and opening day. We had a number of people show up, about 200 people in total, just come and talk to us and say, hey, this is what I think about the park, this is what I'm worried about, this is what, I think the future needs to be. We had to collect that data via survey, which was advertised in the website, Facebook, social media. I believe someone said that they heard us on the radio at opening day. So it was a big push to get people to come out and talk to us, and they did. These pictures you see in front of you are a compilation of a visual preference exercise. So, people are here, they didn't come specifically to talk to us, they're at opening day, or big truck day. How do I quickly figure out what are their preferences? Well, I hand them a survey card or a survey, they'll give me that data, which we'll get into later. But while you're here, what do you want to see in Wendell? If you, let's go through. These red boxes indicate the items that people were most interested in. I'll go into this a little more detail. Of those, the number one thing people were asking for, a splash pad. Now, given it's summertime when we're doing this and it's hot, but a splash pad is a trending activity. We've seen it. It's been a growing trend. More and more people want to see in their communities. It's about quality of life. It's about having a place to go with the kids. And as the temperatures seem to be constantly rising every summer, they become more and more popular. That was overwhelming. But right behind it was adventure play areas. Now, this one might be unfamiliar to some of you, but what is adventure play? That's a small zip line. That's a climbing wall, a rock. That's nature-based type recreation. All across the country, that's become popular. And in a trendy community like this, we heard it. People want adventure play type facilities. You look at the next one on there, 23 votes, it's a lot less. But again, it's that adventure line, small zip line. You may have seen those at some playgrounds. But what really surprised me, of course, climbing wall was in there too, but look at that accessible play features. That rarely ever pops up. It's always offered to community. But your community said, well, hey, just as important is it that it's accessible. That's saying something about the mood and the heart of the community. I was impressed. It made that top list. The summary of the survey we'll get into now. You had about 306 people decide to take that long survey, fill it out, representing about 701 individuals. What that means is it's a household survey. How many people are within your household? This is what they reported. So 306 surveys. I'm going to go through each one of these questions. We'll go through it quickly. These are the results. The relationship to Wendell. Who are we surveying? The majority, almost 75%, they're residents. Some report being year-round renters. Okay? There was an other group. A lot of those folks said they live in the areas in the municipality, the counties, between these areas we call Wendell. Greatest barrier. What's keeping people from using the parks now? At least how do they report? Not enough time. That's always the answer. I've been asking this question for a long time. That's always the top one. But look at that next one. Facility program not offered and distance too far. Remember we talked about where are the parks in the community and are people driving? It's coming out here. Gender. We did have more females than males take it. But it was a household survey, so it represents the whole household. This is, again, breaking down the ages, which we went through already. It's mostly young families with children. Have you traveled outside of Wendell? This is usually how many people are doing sports leagues, et cetera, or visit other parks. You've got so many good ones around you. Of course, that's going to be a majority yes. How often do you use these other facilities, or what are you using here? What are the top 10? There was a long list. Obviously, the playgrounds were reported as very popular. The ball fields, it was opening day, so we got a lot of that. Recreation center programming, very popular. It's community park. Most of these are what's going on in community park now. And of course, the other active facilities. How do you rate the park? Obviously, the community loves the parks. It's between excellent and good. So you're doing something well now. And people reported a high quality of life. Playground, this is an important one. You've done a lot of things to update that playground over the years, like adding the shade sails recently. The people were requesting adventure play though, so that begs the question, well, what do you think about what we have now?
Two quick questions. One, are these the order that they were
Yes.
in the survey? And second question, I see answered, skipped, and then don't know.
That's right.
So
what we
don't know
also
was
did,
an answer that someone clicked.
it is,
They
these are
didn't
answers
skip
people
it.
clicked.
Okay. thank
Now,
you.
what we gave people the opportunity to do was add additional information. So while you're not gonna get to go through the pages of comments, which they'll be in the plan, a lot of people would report what they meant by that.
Yeah, I just saw don't know continue to track up, so I was wondering if that was survey fatigue or,
Right.
thank you.
What would you participate in? What do people want to do? Look at these. The Wonderland seem to be the super popular thing. People appreciate the events you're putting on now and the catchy names and all that, which I think I've heard about. Well, what improvements could be made? Look at these. Expand the park. They're all there now. They love it, but expand it. Now, what that says to me is people want more. Does it necessarily have to be at that center, at that facility? Maybe, maybe not, but it's something for us to consider. Recreation program events that you'd like to see offered. That box is the majority, of course. Swimming and swimming pool. That goes in line with what people were saying about the splash pad. Again, we're doing this during the summer. It's hot. People love water activities. Special events, we already established that those are very popular. They want to see more of that. Something that kind of popped out was fitness exercise gym. I know you have facilities at the community center. Something for us to look at in a little more detail. Does that need to be changed in some way? And of course, recreation for children. You're a community of young families with kids. Obviously, that's going to be one of the most important things. Top 10 choices here for activities that could be offered at a park. The playground, the splash pad, the jogging trails. This basically says that the other question is valid. Okay, they're saying the same thing here. What facilities do you use now? Nightdale, I mean, that's super popular. Yes, about half the participants report, yes, they use these neighboring communities' facilities. Do you feel there's additional need for park space? Here's that question again. Yes, and now it's overwhelming. People want to see the system expanded. Again, there's just constant, over and over, people want to see more. Sources of funding? This is a hard question. You have to ask yourself, do they understand what all these are? And if they do, what does it turn out to be? Grants. I've never, and Mike, maybe you could agree with me, I've never seen it where grants isn't at the top. And of course it was. But taxes wasn't at the bottom, which it usually is. So that's saying that you have a population that understands it's going to take some funding. We'll get into that in a little more detail because I think there's some creative things that you can do. Would you be willing to pay a nominal fee? That's again, do you understand that if you want more, you're asking us to expand, it's going to cost money? What's the mood of the community? Yes, and we're even willing to pay for it. We'll even pay a fee. It's good information to have. I told you there were pages of these open-ended comments, where people were allowed to say what they wanted to say. And that people wrote paragraphs. But if you cipher that down, it basically was, again, the splash pad was popular. Opportunities in sports, that was the only time I really saw that one pop up. People are still actively or wanting active recreation. We didn't hear about it until it was in the open-ended comments. Okay? Neighborhood parks, that one, clear as day, people are interested in. Better connectivity, I think everybody would agree we have to get to our facilities. And additional greenways goes right along with that. So how do we use all this? And the plan goes into much more detail, but for sake of brevity, I'll break this down. It looks like you're going to need a couple more in the next 20 years, a couple more community parks, okay? Depending on how fast you grow, and at least 3 new neighborhood parks. And that allows you to do a couple different things. It meets that need that's being requested. Looking at those standards, it brings you up to where the standards say you should be, but it does another important thing, and that's put your facilities in places that are more accessible to the community. As the growth moves in, people, it's not all over on one side of town with no parks. They have to come to the center. It gives you an opportunity to spread that around and have a service area that's reflective of where growth is happening. But what do you do specifically for what you have now? Wendell Park, there's a few low-hanging fruit. There's some big things, okay? We'll get into this a little more detail when we start talking about costs and funding. But you got a restroom concession building that's old. I know it's had some updates recently to the sewers. That's great. There's still a little bit more that could be done. Matter of fact, during the opening day, the community was a long line.
Yeah.
You know, we need to update this. Multi-generational adventure playground. Again, this is adding facilities to or amenities to what you already have. That's adding that rock, adding that little zip line, adding a net to climb on. You don't have to demolish what you have. It's a great playground, but you could expand it with some of these fitness stations. Okay, so mom and dad and grandparents can be with the kids. They like to play too, and it's good for health. We're growing to become a more health-conscious community. Expand the trails to Wendell Falls, to the Parkway. People are already walking that way now, and they're going back and forth. You have an opportunity with town-owned land to develop those trails and create that connectivity. So there are other sidewalks from the park to downtown that could be further developed. As the population increases, what you have now is going to be more congested. Opportunities to maybe looking at widening it, creating a multi-purpose path. Distance signage, this is something I heard a lot, which is another new one. People want to know how far they're walking. You know, where's a quarter mile out here? I walk this trail. I have a pedometer, but I don't like being connected, is what one lady told me. She goes, I wish there was a sign that told me how far I'd walked. Something interesting, it's easy to do. It adds, you know, people would be willing to use it more if they knew how far they were going, especially if they're counting calories. Jake Mayfield erosion improvements, that's some minor stuff. You may have already been done. I saw some work out there recently, but certainly keeping the existing ball fields up is important. Same with the community center. I was out there once, people are using the fitness facilities, but it was packed. What do we do there? Repave the entry drive. I know you've probably been out there and seen the asphalt needs to be fixed, right? That needs to be done. Landscaping improvements. I asked a number of people during Big Truck Day that came out, I said, well, what's the difference between the stuff going on in Nightdale and here? And they said, oh, well, I think their landscaping is really nice. The entrance sign is really nice. We have these great new wayfinding signs, but once you get to the park, we need some improvements in how it looks. That's easy to do. I think if it's the center of town, and people are there, it needs to say something. It needs to be prominent. What do we do at Town Square? It's a tough one. You know, I know this is a piece of land that you don't exactly own, but it's dear near and it's right in the center, and you have facilities there. I think a splash pad, this is definitely an opportunity on the adjacent parcel to put a splash pad. That brings people to downtown so that they can shop. Now you're going to have to deal with the influx of people, parking, et cetera. That all needs to be planned. That's certainly an important location, I think, to consider. And then it goes with pedestrian improvements around it. If you're going to put a magnet attraction destination there, now you got to update your sidewalks. You got to paint those crosswalks. You got to get the buttons so people can cross easily. There's those improvements that come along with it. The stage. I hadn't heard this, but when I walked up to the stage, it didn't seem safe. I think it needs to be assessed. Need to see, you know, where it's at in its lifespan. Does it need to be updated? That also goes back to accessible paths. I'm able to walk around the park, but is everybody able to get to these facilities? It didn't seem so. So ADA improvements are certainly important. Additional seating opportunities. With all these new people, and people come from downtown looking for a place to sit when they come to visit, there's only a few benches. So seating opportunities, and with that I can throw in shade as well, which goes with landscaping. So what does it look like when we add these 3 new neighborhood parks, 2 community parks, and updating what you have? You notice, if you just blur your eyes and look at town, you see all those red areas, that's Wendell. Now look at these circles. You're covering, with this plan, that entire area. So we talk about accessibility and level of service, reaching those populations, you've covered it here. Now I will say you have 3 community parks shown on this map. That's because we have an A-B option. I think this one on the north side of town, I heard a lot of people mention that would be a great place for another park. And it seems to be, it fits the bill. Now, it could change, but on the north side, that seems to be a good option. Whether you build another park, that second one in the south or the west, depends on the growth patterns and the land costs and what's that piece of land going to take to develop. But these 2 areas seem to be the right areas to put that park. You'll also notice over on the east side with the neighborhood parks. Again, these are great parcels that are the size and offer the utilities, et cetera, that would make it easier to do than a raw piece. So generally speaking, we're talking facility and program accessibility, Design and daily maintenance, like what's going on with the existing facilities. Connectivity, you want to be a walkable community. You got a walkable downtown. Now let's connect downtown to the park better. Let's connect the future parks. Let's connect to the Greenway, et cetera. Contiguous property acquisition. This is a big one for right now. Why? Because you know you're going to be growing a lot. You know you're going to need these new facilities, and land's probably cheaper and easier to get now than it will be 5, 10, 15 years from now. So that's definitely something this plan needs to recommend. Consider the land next to park. Can you grab a piece over there? I know one in particular we talked about you've been interested in, but I know it's tough. But if you could expand what you have, you've got more people coming, it's important. Greenway funding, this connectivity, there are funding opportunities. You can use part of that for Greenway. Right. Bicycle facilities, wayfinding, I'll go through this list. Intergovernmental cooperation, this is a huge one. You're so close to these other communities and you are all growing. You're all going to have connectors that touch. How you partner, figure out how that happens, super important, and it needs to happen now, the planning. Working with developers, partnership agreements, et cetera. Staffing recommendations, you pretty much have the staff you need for this future growth. Now, I will say with these big parks, maintenance, mowing, taking care of those places, you're going to need somebody like a supervisor, okay? But as far as your basic staff to run and do programming, I think what you have in place is sufficient. Priority projects.
So what Jim has described here is what we have and what we need. We've heard a lot from the community. And so what we wanted to do, Jim's given a long list of projects. So how do we take that and absorb that and determine what the priorities are? What we're proposing is an opportunity for discussion to see if you agree with what we're showing, what we're proposing. And these are broken up into short term and midterm and then long projects. So the short term is the first 5 years. So we have this list, and let's just go through those briefly and then come back and revisit and see if that's how we feel we're responding to the community. We're also looking at costs and how that can be distributed over a period of time. So short-term one is number one, and these aren't, 1 through 7 can be flexible, but Ashley Wall Square, new splash pad. Obviously, that was in response to the community. Stage repairs, accessibility, town park improvements, updating play equipment, pavement maintenance, landscape enhancement, if you will. Trail improvements, that was obviously a response to connectivity. Implementing, one thing we talked about is acquiring new land. The old saying is, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. So we want to think ahead of and respond to the growth ahead of time. Land acquisition is going to be really important as a component of this plan. So determining the location, the size, assessing the property to determine, is this the type of land that will fit the needs for our community? That's going to be really important. So doing a feasibility study will be an important factor in identifying the appropriate land. As well as constructing the first neighborhood park in response to that plan. Designing for a 1.4 mile multi-purpose path along Pool Road to the Jake May Drive intersection. Greenway Trail location and design, again, responding to constructing a Wendell Falls connector to downtown. That's a really important component of that connectivity there. And partnering, I think partnering with your school system, again, not competing but complementing the other services that are provided with other communities, whether some of them may be private. So again, looking at that from a short-term priority. The midterm, that's looking at the following 5 years, 2025 to 2030. Implementing more park improvements there at Ashley Wall Square. Town park renovations, again, adding on, that'll be a multi-phase project, and many of these will be as far as neighborhood and community parks. Constructing 2 neighborhood parks, and then new community park at the north end of town or on the west side of town. continuing development of greenway trails, I believe that's typically ongoing for most communities, is building momentum as you go. And wayfinding, signage, this is all part of a continual plan that as you add trails, obviously you'll have maintenance, but having those wayfinding, informational signage with the parks and trails will be important. And we'll come back to this, but what I wanted to show you is a sample. We've been working with your manager and your parks director and how this can be put together. This is not the final plan, but the hope is by the end of this document, we want something that can be implemented, that is a thought out. It's considering funding. It's considering how things are staggered with growth in response to responding to the growth, and what the potential costs are going to be. So what we want to do is take the cost for anticipated construction costs for the individual parks, determine what those priorities are going to be, and phase that into a implementable fashion for each individual park. Again, some of these, in many cases, this will be a multi-phased approach for a community or neighborhood park, but we'll take advantage of grant and funding opportunities through Wake County, as well as North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust funds, so that these are staggered in an implementable fashion. And I wanted to come back and just kind of we've gone through a lot of material here, but I wanted to come back and see how you felt about the proposed improvements. If you felt like that made sense from a short term, a first 5 years, and then the second 5, and then long-term improvements. Any questions or ideas or thoughts?
Any questions or comments?
Did you have any particular locations in mind when you're talking about the 2 neighborhood parks? Any areas?
Well, we can come back to this. Well, went too far. Is it forward, Jim? I think it's backward. Bear with me. Oh, it's forward. I went too far. Come on. There we go.
Right here.
So this is our service area. The proposed solid circles are proposed parks. The dashed lines are existing. So we've got the larger circles there, and more of the bronze orange color are community parks. We're proposing 2 community parks, so we've got flexibility on the location. But they're strategically placed where we have service area gaps. And we're anticipating growth in these areas. Part of this is determining, finding appropriate land of a size that's amenable to what we want to do as far as a combination of athletic fields, parking facilities, and so forth. Obviously, we've got one shown in the general vicinity of Wendell Middle School, one shown more closer to the east with Greenway connection, and then one more towards the central south. But we want to keep this document flexible, and I think that's important, because if we get too bent on having one specific location, sometimes we miss another opportunity. So this allows some flexibility in the general location. So as land opportunities become available, we can look at those different areas and have that availability there. So maybe that answers your question, but we're proposing, although we've got 3 shown here, 3 general locations, we're focusing on 2 proposed community parks.
Any other questions?
Does everyone feel pretty comfortable as far as the short-term and mid-term priorities?
So my obvious question that I'm going to ask every time is, how does this fit into our capital improvement plan and our budget?
Right, so what you'll notice in just kind of a first blush right now is the county will be releasing its RFP in November for its bond funds and how municipalities approach with that. They'll be emphasizing land acquisition and trail construction. So the grant resources where the community was saying they're more interested, those are kind of following our needs right now. Trails, connectivities, park land acquisition. The other thing you'll notice is more of the hard instructor costs are on the back end of a trail, because that's when your population that's gonna need those additional communities are either here or they're not, right? So you wanna be able to acquire land, make connectivity when it's lower cost, build the hardened structure when you have the population that needs the cost. So that's the general dynamics of the plan. We've talked about the town hall project, the ability to do additional projects at that time within the anticipated borrowing and payments in our capital improvement plan. So this captures the ability to do some of the newer items that there's more high demand up front. So if it's a splash pad or adventure park, connectivity and signage, some of those types of improvements, that'll be done in the first couple years in coordination with that funding that's already programmed in our capital improvement plan. The state right now is looking at Land Water Conservation Fund, which originally funded the Wendell Town Park, allowing communities to use that to renovate and repurpose old land water conservation projects. So allowing the state to go through its policy change process to get to that becomes more of a midterm. So how do we improve the community center, renovate the existing restroom facility? Those might be more in those grant programs in the 2 to 5 year window. So there's kind of some immediate needs that the town has with connectivity and land and greenway acquisition. That matches funding sources coming online with the county. There's a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund for an initial town neighborhood park that might put playground and open space closer to some of our families, so it's walkable to some of our neighborhoods in town. And then there's the further out parks as the population grows. So the ability to fund the improvements increases with population and diversity of land use as well over that anticipated over that same time period. If growth doesn't happen, facilities aren't needed. So that's part of the living nature of a Parks and Recreation master plan. That if the growth happens quicker, then we need them quicker. If the growth doesn't happen for some reason, then we don't do it. Thanks. You're welcome.
Any other questions? I don't see why not.
I'm sorry, could the citizen come
Can you
to
come
the
up where we can
stand
hear
so we
you?
can get your name and address in the record, and also allow you to speak in the mic so it's recorded?
This one? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Chana Bowie. I live at 7233 Bowview Drive in Wendell in the Vineyards of Tuscan. My question was, I totally understand what you were saying as far as the parks and the recreations, but I feel like the recreation part, is there something that's a little more geared towards teens? Because I've been in Wendell I lived in Wendell, my first house. I sold that. I lived in an apartment in Raleigh, and I liked Wendell so much, I came back. And all of that was access to my children when we first moved here, because they were 12, 6, and 4. So every event downtown we were at, the Winter Wonderland, my son loved it, everything. But now that they're teens, it's not really much for them as far as with the recreation part of it.
What activities would they like to do?
Well, I know that just last week they had BMX come to the school, and my daughter fell in love with that, and I didn't even know she liked to ride bikes, so she asked me about that. And then my son, he does like the robotics things, because I know that they have those at the YMCA in Nightdale. where they have, you can go to like Saturday classes and do those. Or the parks, they're not so into the parks anymore. Or even like when they had I think it was a couple weeks ago, the downtown window, like, oh, come on guys, let's go. They're like, no. Like, we used to always go. They don't want to do anything anymore like that because they're older now. And I'm still want to do it, but they're like, no, Mom, no. So if it's not the movies or out to eat, then it's really not much for them.
Okay, so you want us to consider some more things that are, teenager appropriate and things
Even if
that-
it's just
that
one, yeah, but
teenagers would
something.
enjoy more, maybe by expanding programming to accommodate that, and a skate park.
Yes,
I hear skate park a lot, okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Or mountain bike trails.
Mountain bike
Yes.
trails,
He did
okay.
mountain biking at summer camp this year, and he loved that
Okay.
too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, thank you very much for your input, we appreciate it.
you're welcome.
You told the right people, they're right there, so, okay, go ahead.
Well, and that's a great comment, and that's something, a growing trend is having teens get out of the house more, and that is a lot of programming, and your parks director he's really innovative and gets excited about offering new types of programs, and those can trend, they change, and I think you've done a great job in responding and trying to find new avenues for, when I'm talking, the Parks Department, new avenues to offer, whether it's at the community building or outdoor events. So I think those will continue to be explored and options as you know, teens come and approach the Parks Department and say, well, can we do these opportunities? I think that lets staff know, hey, there is a need and there's a desire for that. So I'd encourage, you know, that age group and parents to come and mention that as a comment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else from the board have a comment, question?
Just one more comment, and, it's not, we spoke to the connectivity piece, but in all honesty, connectivity is always the, least attractive thing to talk about, because it doesn't have a swing attached to it, or a water sprinkler, or whatever the recreation piece of it is. I had a chance to talk to folks recently about just where, things are located, and it's nice that we have the best hospital, you know, we have all these things, and it's apparent if you look at our current structure that we missed some of the connectivity, specifically walkability around those parks. And I don't know if it goes into this part of the master plan or if it goes into part of our transportation plan or the way we score points on other things, but making sure that the 2 mile circle is nice, and I'm assuming that the academic put the 2 mile circle around it because there's a thought about walkability. It certainly seems like if we're going to make this level of investment moving forward in trying to lock in recreation facilities and places, I think making sure that the area directly adjacent to that area has good walkability is just good common sense. But often something that might not land in this plan and might not rise to the attention in the transportation plan and may end up just settling to the bottom. So just wanted to highlight that.
You want to make sure it's connected to like our pedestrian plan.
Right, just
We
make sure
have
that
to make
one doesn't-
sure, and if that's something we can,
Oh, definitely.
okay,
Everything's
it all goes
connected.
together,
Land
okay.
use, transportation, your parks and rec, how everything connects in a community is part of the fabric that makes up a community. So if you're a family, you don't always have time to get in your car and drive to the town park. You need that walkable solution to get to a neighborhood playground. You need the place for the structured activity, but you also sometimes just want a place to go eat a picnic or read a quiet book in your neighborhood. And so there needs to be a balance between kind of that active park offering versus just the ability to connect within a neighborhood and get there safely. And one thing that I recognize from the demographics is that our senior population is about average to slightly below average looking across the region. The population below that, my age up to 65, is actually very low in numbers, but then the more meat of workforce and young adults is strong, is average to slightly above average, and then the youth is very high. And so, if you're looking at a 10 to 15-year investment window, you kind of need to maintain your senior level activities and services and maintain, update things there. But as far as the investment for where the population is and where the population will age into the next 10 years, it's really more of an active recreation and youth. And so it does speak to a younger population now that are going to be the teenagers that the citizens spoke to, and young adults that want to get out and get on a greenway and ride their bike or play with their latest technology or toy and run it down the ways, or so that all needs to be interconnected.
Okay, anything else? Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited.
Thank you.
Process-wise, staff will finish the capital improvement part with the consultants, and then bring back the final plan for report and adoption within a month.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. All right, well, we have no public hearing scheduled for tonight, so we're going to move into our administrative items. Item 6A is Town of Wendell logo policy, and we're going to hear from Stephanie Smith, Assistant to the Manager. Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, I'm here this evening to request approval for a logo use policy for the town. The logo is the official trademark of the town of Wendell. It is a registered trademark. And the purpose of this policy is to protect the integrity of the town logo. So it's largely a housekeeping item, just to make sure that we have an awareness of when and where the logo is being used. The policy includes logo guidelines regarding the primary and secondary mark, so the full logo with text as well as the mark with the swoosh around the W. And it also includes expectations regarding clear space, size, not to distort the logo, using brand colors, and examples of incorrect usage. So in order for a non-employee to apply for use of the logo, first of all, employees are permitted to use the logo on town property or materials promoting or representing the town. Also, members of the Board of Commissioners and Citizen Advisory Board members are permitted to use the logo when supporting town-related initiatives, of course with the guidance and availability of help from staff. Anyone outside town staff would request permission from our town clerk by sending an email with a formal request to use the logo and a description of what the intended use of the logo would be. At that point, staff would review all requests and reply via email with an approval or a denial. All requests will be approved if they're in keeping with the integrity of the town of Wendell's mission, goals, and are for the benefit of the community as a whole. I can answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Comments?
Question, I know we had and this would have predated both Stephanie, you and Mark, a conversation on this 3 years back maybe. Is this, I mean, this is the policy that we haven't had, correct?
So, in the past, it hadn't been trademarked. The previous clerk went through the trademark process and had it registered in 2016, but there wasn't a policy for use adopted at that time. And so we get requests on occasion from local nonprofits about using it, and this just clarifies. It also helps that if it's inappropriately used, then we do have an adopted policy and process that someone should have gone through, and helps us enforce the integrity of the town for an improper use.
The only other question that I had, if you use the community center, for instance, to have a fundraiser, an event, but you're using it for your own purposes, we charge you a fee, we charge you staff time. And I understand that we often give waivers to nonprofits and vote on it that way. Putting a policy into place clearly defines a lot of this, but has there been thought given to if you're going to use the logo for profit, that the town should be compensated in some way, being as there is that risk that's out there, and two, obviously, you wouldn't be using our logo if you didn't think it was gonna create a profitable environment. I wouldn't use it if you didn't think.
So that sounds like it's more in line with kind of a special event partnership. We're actually working on a special event policy now to bring back at a later date. In terms of profitability, that's not something that we've addressed with this policy. That's certainly something that we can look further into and possibly bring back an amendment should we get to a point where we want to cross that bridge.
I would look at that as you're adding a revenue to the town's budget also. So it's an unaccounted revenue, in commercial use, I'm more likely to bring that to the board for approval. That's consistent with what I've seen in the past. It also goes back to, is there a benefit to the overall community? When there's you want to make sure that a product in that case would represent the town well and not lessen the town in some manner. And so a denial or some form of commercial use would probably be brought with an agreement that the town would need to a board to approve. Any kind of contractual relationship related to money would come to the board. That would still be consistent with this. But if someone wants to make money off the town logo and it's consistent with y'all's policy, the town can receive revenue. I am in favor of new revenue sources. And those for the record.
It was kind of my thought there.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? It's my recollection that up until this time, the way the former clerk handled it, she received requests and she brought it to the board. That's kind of what I recall. I don't think, and I like this better, frankly. I think it should be a task that y'all handle for the most part. So, all right, is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the logo use policy for the town of Wendell.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the logo use policy for the town of Wendell. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Is that everyone? Is anybody opposed? I didn't hear down there. Okay. All right, item 6B is a resolution of intent to formally close a right-of-way known as the alley located between East Campin Street, 3rd Street. And we're going to hear from Assistant Planning Director Brian Coates. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is a resolution of intent to formally close the alley between East Campin Street and 3rd Street. It's also in that intent resolution is to schedule a public hearing for November 25th. According to state law, we have to have do a legal ad for 4 weeks in a row, so that's why the public hearing will be November 25th. The request before you is to formally close the entire length, 3,000 square feet. The alley splits property owned currently by the Perry family and those 2 parcels owned by Shalimar Holdings. The final plats that are in your packet are from 1906 and a little more recent, I think the 1940s, which show that that alleyway was platted. It's never been maintained by DOT. It's never been improved. It's basically like gravel area currently. It's not maintained by DOT, and it's shown in the Wake County GIS layer. To formally close the road, we do have to do an intent and then schedule a public hearing, which we're asking to have on November 25th. We're going to run some legal ads for 4 weeks in a row, according to state statute. And given that the alley is unimproved, staff is in favor of this. The requested land would be split between the abutting property owners. The northern section would be between the 2 Perry properties, and the southern section would be between the Shalimar Holding and Perry, which is shown currently in Wake County GIS layers. And I can also field any questions that you may have.
Anyone have any questions? Mr. Coates? Questions?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution of intent to close the road right away and then to go ahead and schedule the public hearing on the 25th of November.
All right, so we have a motion to adopt the resolution of intent to close the right-of-way and schedule the public hearing for November 25th. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move into our other business. Town board members, briefly, I'm going to give you a little information about Campo. I had a last-minute emergency conflict, and I was unable to attend, but I've requested and received a report of the minutes. They held a public hearing on the 2020-2029 Transportation Improvement Program, received a federal rescission update. They received information on the 2018-2027 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment Number 10. They received the 2050 MTP data inputs, and they heard a series of project updates, which are always presented at those meetings. All right. I think we're going to hear from next time?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to hear from Commissioner Myrick next time about the Eastway Senior Center. All right, let's move into Commissioners' reports, and we'll start with Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. And part of it is based off of the public comment we heard earlier this evening, and classic, and this is a prime example of what I had already intended on talking about. We currently live in a country with a president that is under investigation by an opposition party and likely has some sort of impeachment something discussion happening. We live in a state where 120 of my dearest friends can't get together and figure out how to get a budget written and passed. And we live in a time where everyone feels the need, the desire, or some sort of personal privilege to go on the internet and say whatever they want because they're never going to see that person again, or they're not going to talk to them, or if we disagree, we don't have to talk in the future. We can write people off, we can push people to the side, we can bloviate, we can make things bigger or smaller based on our circumstances at the time. It's not healthy at the federal level, and this is a comment I've made before. It's not healthy at the state level. And it's toxic the closer it gets to you, I promise. The closer that level of discord, and the closer the level of the inability to have a conversation, the inability to do anything but just yell louder and say that I'm right, doesn't work. It's not good government. It's not the way we were designed to work. But at the end of the day, it's also just not right. I'd be happy to talk to anybody, but I was looking forward to having a conversation with public comments similar to the ones I have with most people that show up, have a public comment. I noticed that we were here, we were willing to film and put it, I'm assuming on Facebook, likely live based on the buttons I saw click back there. But as soon as we were over, 7 days before an election, we're going to show up, we're going to make one comment, we're going to say some things, and then we're going to leave. That's fine. You're completely entitled to it. Everyone in the world is entitled to their public comments, and you are. But to say that that's some sort of leadership or that's some sort of real desire to let people know when you say it and run, it's like Facebook, man. You can go on and say whatever you like and log out. Doesn't matter. It does. It does. It hurts the way we communicate at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. It's not right. It's not effective. It's toxic. Continue down this road if you like. It's a dangerous game, and we are all on the same boat. We're all riding down the same rapids together. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. Although I will say that I have a strong inclination that it'll be a lot more kumbaya in about 8 days. Nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Boyette?
I need to preemptively apologize to the manager and the police chief, but it's going to be a sorry, not sorry. for bringing this, but I wanted to bring this. I bought this at our local ABC store. It is Boots Vodka, and it's made by Oakley Distilling here in Wendell. I'm very proud to say that I was able to find it. It was delicious. I want to thank, it was, I didn't drink the whole thing myself. I like to support local businesses, and I know that the Oakley storefront's one that doesn't often see a whole lot of traffic, but they're a local business. There's something we didn't have before, and I just want to say that I appreciated being here, and I wanted to support a local business, and so here we go, and you can find it in our local ABC store, so thank you for that. All I had about that.
All right, Commissioner Myrick.
Next time you bring a liquor bottle to a board meeting, it better be full. I hit you my bill. No comment.
All right. Commissioner Lutz?
No comments tonight.
Commissioner Carroll?
No comment.
All right, real briefly, I want to tell you, we had this past week the Wendell Elementary School annual third grade field trip to the town hall. We held, they have a little civics lesson, and then we have a mock board meeting here. The children were well-mannered and inquisitive. They always are. Their questions and comments were on point and absolutely related to the topics that we were discussing. I was very impressed. Just to give you an update on what they did not pass the budget that was submitted to them. They approved a mixed-use development that would allow 3-story buildings near the downtown. They did not approve the mural request. They approved a backyard chicken keeping ordinance, and they passed a leash law for dogs and cats. I thought it was very interesting. One young man in the audience made the comment that he was opposed to the 3-story buildings in the downtown because he said it would take away from our small town charm, and that 3 stories were too tall. And then another young lady said, that she used these exact words, that she strongly disagreed with cats on a leash because she said cats don't like that, and that owners won't or can't get them on there, and it would be too difficult to make people do, and how would we ever enforce it? And I was struck by how we have these very same conversations up here, and that third graders get it. And I found it very interesting and very timely under the current circumstances of some of the comments that they made. But they were very engaged, and their comments were well thought out, and I feel very confident that our future is very bright with those young men and young women at the helm. I wanted to mention briefly the thanks to the Parks and Rec for a successful treat trail. It's a very popular event. It's copied all over the state now, and I think Jeff invented it here. It was ours first. And it showcases local businesses in our park, and it's a great activity for residents and visitors. So thank you for all of y'all's hard work. It's always nice, always well attended, it's always a fun time. I also wanted to give you a quick reminder that our next meeting will be on Tuesday, November 12th at 7. Monday, November 11th is Veterans Day, and Town Hall will be closed in observation of Veterans Day holiday. So we'll be meeting on Tuesday that week. All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor? We're adjourned.